Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to talk you through how I painted this cat for Artober 2025, day 2. My prompt was black cat. Shocking, I know, but very spooky, very Halloween-y. And this year, similar to the previous year, I haven't put any pressure on myself to do any certain number of pieces during this month. I'm trying really hard to take care of my hand because it gets very irritated very easily if I overdo it. So we're just doing as much as we can. Whenever we feel like drawing or painting something spooky, we're gonna do it. If we don't feel like it, we're not gonna do it. And also any medium is acceptable. This is why it's Artober, not Inktober. So I decided to do this digital painting. I did this on my iPad on Medibang Paint, and let me discuss some of the more interesting points of this piece. So we started off with a sketch. I was freehanding the sketch completely originally, and then I was just struggling to get the whole body right, like the eye on the right side, so technically the left eye was not looking right, and then the torso I didn't realize was actually, I was making it too short, and I was like, why does this not line up? So I did what lots of people do, and I took the reference image and I put it underneath my sketch, and I was like, oh, that's why it looks wonky. The torso is long. This is a long kitty cat. So I fixed it up. I did still I tried to trace over sort of the outline of the eye, and it still looked too small, but as you can see just a little bit earlier, I did end up fixing it. It was no trouble. So the face, I ended up painting piece by piece. I was sort of color picking and then changing the color, mostly changing the value and the saturation based on what I wanted. If you just straight up color pick from a photo in particular, it's going to end up looking super flat. Also, I think it's a good skill to be able to learn color theory and how to pick your colors properly and how to mix properly, even if it's digital art. So yeah, I generally don't recommend just straight up color picking for everything, but I did use the color picker and then sort of use that as a base of, do I go a little lighter, a little darker, a little more saturated, a little more this, a little more that. So it was a relatively fast process compared to if I was just picking from the chart or whatever, however you have it set up on your app, the color, the color thing where it's white in the corner, you know what I mean. So that is usually how I do things on Medibang Paint. And I started with the ears because I wanted to start with the more colorful parts first and then sort of work into the blacks, which I think helped me quite a bit. It was actually a really fun process getting to the black, so I'll explain that in just a moment. We're almost done with the face here, but I started with the ears and then I went into the eyes. The eyes I did end up touching up a bit later, and the ears at the very end as well, but I just wanted to get them down before I got onto the big challenge of the fact that most of this cat is pretty dark. So I did the face as best as I could. I do end up touching up some more, but then I was like, why don't I just start with the darkest color and then I paint light on top of it. Haven't done that for a while. Of course, when I paint on canvas with acrylic gouache, that's something I can very easily do, but when I use alcohol markers, I have to go from light to dark. You can't put a light marker on top of a dark marker and expect it to be lighter. So this was a fun challenge. It was different from my usual. Usually when I paint digitally even, I start with the mid-tone and then I add darker colors and lighter colors as needed. I'm kind of all over the place whenever I paint digitally, so I don't do this is one base color of this torso area. I don't do that. I get too stuck into things if I spend too much time on them for too long, so I try to go to different areas to make sure I keep everything sort of loose and not with it. I always change to the tiniest little brush if I start doing something for too long, so I didn't want that. This was less than an hour, actually, this painting. From start to finish, it was 50-something minutes. So, actually did take a couple breaks in between, but overall it didn't take me very much time, and I think being so fluid in my process helped me just keep going without going crazy. But yeah, this was kind of like, you know how a lot of people like painting on black canvases, or if they're doing like something opaque like pastels, they might use a really dark paper, like a black paper or just a really dark colored paper, and then layer the lighter colors on top of it. That's kind of what it felt like. It felt like the opposite of what I usually do, where like if I add darker colors, it feels like I'm sort of carving out a shape. Whereas this time it felt like I was adding on to a shape, and it was a very fun process, actually. I didn't mind it at all, and I might try doing something like this again another time, especially for Halloween. You know, we like the spooky dark tones, like the ravens. I might do a raven next, we'll see. So I would like to try that again. Also, I loved how some of the like lighter parts of like the shadows are actually not black or gray. They're brown. They're like a reddish brown, and that just reminded me that black cats or black dogs or really any black fur is just a whole bunch of brown. It's just really dark brown, actually. Believe it or not, they're not actually voids. So the next time you're intimidated when trying to draw or paint a portrait of a black colored animal, keep that in mind. Black is actually not straight up black, and there are ways to add dimension. And I think perhaps using a color picker, whether you're doing your piece digitally or even traditionally, I have opened up my iPad before and used a color picker just to see what actually is this color, and then I've gone and painted it traditionally and made at least some of my palette that way. So it was a good learning experience, I think, because black fur can be very intimidating. And when I started out, I was like, how am I going to paint this black blob? And it turned out to not actually be just a black blob. So highly recommend it, a really good exercise. And I just added some of the finishing touches here, fixed up the ears a bit, added a little more of those finer fur details. But again, I didn't want to make the brush too small, it gets too stuck into it. And then that was it. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!